Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
Hey everyone, this is Jillian, and I am here with my friend Brittnee. Hi, Brittnee.
Hey, Jillian.
So welcome to Sidebar, where we're going to chat about Court Junkie episodes, other cases we're following, and basically all things true crime.
Yes. And in today's episode, we are going to discuss some of the behind the scenes info from the Skylar Nemetz case, Joel Guy Jr., the David Dooley case, and some updates on cases that you've covered in the past. So Jamarion Lawhorn and Anita Smithey. And we'll also talk about the cases that we're obsessing over and following currently. And then we will also talk about Phil Spector, who recently passed away, and some of the disappointing reactions that the media had about that. So Jillian is then going to tell us something that recently happened that made her realize that she is a true court junkie through and through. So yeah, let's just jump on in. So Jillian, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I actually just recently am moving all my recording stuff into a brand new recording studio. And I put that in quotes because it's basically just a bigger room, I guess you could say, that I'm renting currently. But if you know me, you know that I started Court Junkie in my closet. So this is a pretty big step and I'm really excited about it.
I think you're shorting yourself. I've seen the office space. It's very nice. It's an upgrade and a very exciting big step, I feel like, for you just to have your own real space to record.
Yes, finally, with no dogs barking or kids crying or yelling in the background. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
fun.
Absolutely.
So how are you doing?
I am doing so good. Aside from the fact that we're in the midst of a snow storm, this week has been crazy with the snow, which has been good for my daughter. And I know yours too, loving to play out in the snow. So aside from that, things are really good. I'm busy working on something that's very exciting. I hate using the word exciting over and over again, but like that is what I would call this. It's very exciting. So in partnership with Jillian and her Court Junkie team, I'm working on launching a new podcast that will be all about civil trials. There's so many cases, civil cases that are really fascinating. And so we wanted to give those some love. And so I'm working on putting that together. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. Hopefully we'll have more updates for you next month. So let's jump in because we have a lot to discuss today. As I said, we're going to just do some quick recaps on the episodes that you put out this month and talk about some behind the scenes, some stuff that wasn't released in the actual podcast. So the first one is Skylar Nemetz, The Soldier, episode 140. And so as a reminder, this case followed 2 young couple really in their 20s, Skylar Nemetz, his wife, Danielle. Tragedy when Skylar shot Danielle, and there's no question there, like he shot her. The question was it an accident or was it intentional? And so a lot of comments that you got on Instagram about this case. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but first interested to hear, Jillian, why did you pick this case? What stood out here?
So this was a case that I had heard about years ago, and I knew the basic details, but I didn't know too much in depth about it. So to be honest, just selfishly, I wanted to cover it on the podcast so that I could find out what happened and then share with my listeners what I thought to be a fascinating case. Like you said, there's no doubt that Skylar shot and killed Danielle, but at the trial, like you said, it was all about intent. Did the gun accidentally go off as he was pointing it at her, or did he mean to murder her? It was also a very controversial case with very active participants on both sides. And what I mean by that is it's one of those cases where you'll likely find a message board or comments section where you have fierce defenders of Danielle, the victim, and who she was and how justice was served. And then you have fierce defenders of Skylar. And that includes his mom, who I believe I've seen on several comment sections and message boards, although it could potentially not be her. It could be somebody who's just posing as her, but she was definitely coming off as a fierce defender of her son and did not believe that he deserved any kind of punishment. So it's a very complex case with no doubt a lot of emotions. And I think that probably comes out when you look at listener comments about the case or different emails that I've received about it. One interesting thing, because another thing I want to do here is talk about things that didn't make it into the episode, things I didn't include or things I, found in my research. And one of the things was there's this 48 hours interview with Erin Moriarty that's on YouTube. And she did this interview with Skylar during the trial and before the verdict. And I just thought some of his answers were just pretty interesting, honestly. His mom, he did talk about his mom, for example, and he said that his mom spent her life savings on his defense. She sold her jewelry, doesn't have a car anymore, that kind of thing. He said he did have to explain to her that what he did in the state of Washington is classified at least as negligence. And he said that it took her a while to come around and understand that. Another thing he said is that he knew that he made a mistake, but that he didn't know exactly how the court system works. So he didn't realize that he would have to go to prison. And he said that at first he thought any jury in their right mind would see that it was an accident. So I came across that interview and I just saw that there were just, some fascinating nuggets on his mindset, especially right before the verdict itself was announced, what he was thinking. And, like I said, I came across comments that were reportedly from his mom online. And so it was interesting to see that, she spent her life savings on his defense.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying about his knowledge of what was going to happen just shows his age. He's so young, like a kid, essentially. And it just, that whole case felt very sad. In my opinion, I think he got mad and maybe he was just messing around, or maybe it was a moment of rage. I think you talked in your podcast about how he had this kind of explosion of rage when he would get angry that other people had seen. So maybe it was that. What struck me as interesting, and I don't like to read in too much to people's reactions after a tragedy because I feel like everybody has a different reaction to trauma and pain. But he sat in the back of that cop car and he kept saying over and over again, it was an accident. I love my wife. I love my wife. I love my wife. And obviously, that's your wife, If it was an accident, wouldn't you be saying, like, that was an accident. I didn't mean to do that. The gun just went off. We were messing around. But he kept saying he loved his wife. And for me, that felt like his remorse, because in that moment, he got so mad that he just went off. That's where I landed on it. A lot of your listeners had commented on Instagram saying that he had training. And anybody who's had training, especially military training, knows how to use a weapon. And more importantly, they know the safety behind it. So this excuse that he was cleaning his gun and it just went off didn't sit well with your listeners and with people in general. Although I think, 70% agreed with the verdict and 30% disagreed in your Instagram poll.
How much was it? It was
69% agreed with the verdict and 31% disagreed.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this one was a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I agree with those who say that, he was a military officer. He had training with guns. He was no stranger to how guns work. So it is kind of hard to wrap your mind around that he had the gun pointed at her head and that it, I definitely don't think it accidentally went off. That part I don't believe. So I guess it would be whether it was something like you said, your theory that he reacted in a rage for some reason and he did it and then immediately was like, oh crap, what did I do? Or if it was like a premeditated plan.
Right.
Which obviously intent can be formed, in seconds. So yeah, I mean, it's just a very interesting case that I figured would garner a lot of buzz around it. It's also one that was obviously covered on 48 Hours. I'm sure, Dateline probably did one about it too, just because, it's not such a cut and dry case. Like, he did it, but why? And it's something that we may never know.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. Good case. Very good one. Okay, so let's talk about Joel Guy Jr. Whew. This one was a doozy. It was hard to listen to, and you gave us a warning of that. So if you listen to it, you probably remember it. This was a case about Joel Guy Jr., who on Thanksgiving weekend of 2016 murdered his mother and father in a very gruesome way, which I don't know if you have some more details on that. I don't know if people want more details on that, but tell us a little bit about why you picked this case.
So I picked this case. One, it was a pretty popular trial law and crime, obviously, is my partner company, and they live streamed it. And so, when looking through their trial library, I came across this one and assigned it. It is a very gruesome case, but I think what fascinated me the most about it is the defense or the non-defense of it, which I'll get into in just a second. As far as gruesome details, just to go back to that for a second, that is definitely something that I do not like to cover. And when I did come across this trial, it occurred to me to not cover it, just kind of due to that reason. I just always think that you never know who's listening.
Right.
And if I'm going to be talking about a public trial, for sure, but if I'm going to be talking about something extremely tragic that happened to this family, how would I feel if I was listening to a podcast and they were glorifying those gruesome details or they were exploiting them? So that's just something that, just a personal preference of mine, I don't really like to get into. I felt like with this one, it's important to know that he stabbed his father and mother multiple times. I don't believe I included the exact amount of times in the episode, but he stabbed his father at least 42 times and his mother at least 30 times. He then cut away their clothes, put down plastic sheeting, dragged their bodies into the upstairs master bathroom, and then quite obviously dismembered them, which, you get that in the episode, I think, because obviously the prosecutor in her opening statements made reference to the fact that he was cooking his mother's head in a pot on the stove, which is just awful and like heartbreaking and it was just horrific. But like I said, I was fascinated by the why of it all.
Right.
So the prosecution said that it was over money because his parents were about to cut him off, and that certainly may be. But when I read about the gruesome details and heard the testimony, I don't know about you, but I was sort of expecting an insanity defense.
Yeah.
That they would say that he was mentally ill at the time, but they didn't. And in fact, his defense barely presented any sort of defense at all. So since there was nothing about that in the trial, I did do a little bit of research to see if I could find anything in the news about any sort of talk about him having any kind of mental illness or being tested for it. And there was nothing. According to WBIR Channel 10 News, they said that there was no proof that has ever been presented to show that he is mentally ill. And the article states that lawyers and family members say that he's intelligent and knows exactly what he's doing. So another thing I found interesting, and this may be related to that, is if you remember the letter he sent to the judge before his sentencing, where he requested to be moved because he wanted to gouge out another inmate's eyes. And in the letter, which I don't believe I put the entirety of the letter in the episode, said, quote, "I'm writing this letter because I don't want to end up with a disciplinary infraction or worse, more criminal charges, nor do I logically believe that this gentleman deserves to be blind. I don't know what to do. I shouldn't be allowed access to another person while they're unconscious. Now, the prosecutor said that this letter was a ploy to get his own jail cell by himself, and the judge seemed to think the same. So I don't know what your thoughts were on that, but, is he really this? I mean, he is, but was he really this manipulative, I guess, that he could say something like that in order to get his own jail cell by himself? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
If he was in there for a nonviolent crime, if he was just your run-of-the-mill criminal who's then saying, I'm scared that I'm going to do this or that, I need to be moved, then I might buy that it's just a ploy to get his own cell. This guy clearly, in my opinion, has something going on. There's something there that makes it, the fact that he didn't have an insanity plea is mind-boggling to me, because you just don't do this to people that your family, people that you care about, that care about you. And to do it in such a callous way. There was one detail that he went, as his mother's head was cooking, he went to go buy some potato salad and come back. There's something missing there. That's not a normal, healthy person. And so because of his history, I do think that was him saying, hey, I'm going to do something that's not good, and I'm trying to give you a heads up on it. And at the end of the day, either way, I think people should listen to him and take that as like a call for help versus just an attention grabbing attempt.
In other words, so you feel like he probably would gouge out maybe I think prison probably does crazy things to people, and they sit there in their own thoughts, and maybe he was like, okay, I've done this once and I don't want to do it again. Not saying necessarily he didn't show any remorse per se, but maybe this was his attempt to say, I don't want to do this again to somebody. Yeah. Well, the prosecutor and the judge do not agree with you, Brittnee.
That's okay. They are far more experienced than I. Just offering a little bit of a different angle here.
So the last point I want to bring up here is that prior to sentencing, it's customary for state probation officials to conduct a pre-sentence investigation. You've probably heard of that the court can use when sentencing a defendant. So according to a letter that the Department of Corrections submitted to the court, when the official went to speak with Joel Guy Jr. in jail, he refused to see her. The official tried to explain what the visit was for, and he refused. She then contacted his attorney, and the attorney said that the pre-sentencing report was irrelevant, that Joel did not have to talk to her, and that they would not be doing the interview. So as a result, a pre-sentencing report was never done. So I just thought that was a little detail that was pretty interesting and relevant also.
Very bizarre case. Okay, let's jump to David Dooley, because I have a lot about this. I actually had seen this story somewhere else before previously, but learned a lot more listening to your episode. So just as a reminder, this was a case about Michelle Mockbee, who was found dead in her workplace in May of 2012. Investigators pretty immediately zoned in on David Dooley, who was convicted and then sentenced to life in prison for her murder. And then in 2016, he would be granted a new trial. Some more evidence came into light. There's a lot here. And you had a lot of comments on Instagram about this case too, around reasonable doubt. So let's talk about it. Why did you pick this case?
So similar to the Skylar Nemetz one, this is a case that I sort of had in the back of my head that I had followed years ago. And when a new trial was ordered for him is when I, was keeping my eye on it and knew that I wanted to cover it. Interestingly, this was a really difficult case to get information about, aside from the fact that Law and Crime did record their trial feed of his retrial. So aside from that, it was really difficult. My Freedom of Information Act request was actually turned down multiple times. So not really sure why that was. But yeah, it was an intriguing case. And I was like, nope, I'm going to plug ahead and we're still going to do it.
Okay. So what do you think? What's your opinion?
So, well, first of all, there's a few things I just kind of want to touch on here. So this case is a mess. And that's another reason why made me want to cover it. So David Dooley was convicted. Then this mysterious surveillance video surfaces that the defense says it never saw. Then during a hearing, it comes out that the lead detective was sleeping with the prosecutor. And so the judge ended up ordering a new trial. Now, how it came out that the prosecutor was sleeping with the lead detective is that during that hearing, during cross-examination, David's attorney, I believe her name is Deanna Dennison, straight up asked the detective if they had been having an affair. And the detective first tried saying that they were just friends. Then he tried saying it was none of her business. And when he was reminded that he was under oath, he then finally admitted it. So I thought that was just a twist that you don't usually hear about in these cases. But then while, awaiting a new trial for murder, and something else that I did just kind of talk about briefly in the episode, I didn't get into too much into it. And mostly that's because I don't have the information regarding it. But while awaiting that new trial, he was charged with child pornography offenses. And that included possessing or viewing material portraying a sexual performance by a minor and using a minor under 16 in a sex performance. And that's according to Boone County court records. And he actually pleaded guilty to that. Now, like you said, many of my listeners had, I guess, conflicting viewpoints about this verdict. And if you had doubts about the verdict, you definitely would not be alone. After his first conviction, I found something online where David's family, including his wife, told reporters that the Innocence Project was looking at his case and were expected to meet with him. So again, that was after the first trial when he was convicted, and that was before he got a new trial. So I'm not sure what happened with that after David ended up getting a new trial anyway. And I'm not sure if the Innocence Project will be involved after the second conviction. I have no idea, but I did think that was an interesting aside.
Yeah, very interesting twist. Like I said, a lot of comments on Instagram about reasonable doubt. The husband, I don't know if two things that stuck with me with the husband. One, he immediately scrubbed he gets a phone call that his wife has been murdered and he scrubs his computer.
There were expert testimony, like kind of a battle of the experts who one said that program automatically starts up just when you start up your computer.
Okay.
And then the defense's expert said, no, that's not what happened. So I don't know about that. So I tend to not think it was the husband.
Okay.
Yes.
What about the $10,000 check that he doesn't know who it was written to?
So because those friends then did say that, like I think the wife of his friend admitted that she had asked him for that money.
All right. Well.
So, but no, this is definitely something that came up a lot. And, I have no idea, but I just always feel like if we think that there's reasonable doubt, or if someone were to think that there's reasonable doubt with the defendant, and then you present a new suspect as though there's not reasonable doubt there either, in my opinion, I don't think I could have voted guilty for David Dooley because of the reasonable doubt. And because just for me, I mean, unless I'm 100% sure and I'm on a jury, I couldn't do it. I could not sentence somebody.
Well, you asked an Instagram poll on the verdict. And so 67% agreed with the verdict and 33% disagreed. So a similar breakdown from the Skylar Nemetz case of agree versus disagree, but an interesting split there.
Yeah. Now, so the interesting part of it is because for me, it's like, it's hard to say, do you agree with the jury? Because I feel like there's always two ways to look at that question.
Right.
Like how I think about it anyway. I always think about it, if I were on the jury, how would I have voted hearing this evidence?
Yeah.
And that's different for me than do I think he's guilty?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, personally, I do think that he is the likely suspect, and I do think that he's guilty. But I don't know that the prosecution was able to prove it. That's just kind of what I think. So looking at it that way, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that he, like personally, do you feel that he is probably guilty? And how would you vote if you were on the jury? Is it different or is it the same?
I think that not everything was presented accurately at trial, maybe because I'm kind of taking this other look at the husband, it clouds it a little bit for me. So I would say it wasn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt for me.
Right. And what that says too is that the defense was successful in presenting this alternative suspect.
Right.
Or suspects, because I believe there was also another warehouse worker that they were pointing at as well. So that just says that, at least it got through to a few people.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably have some updates on that in future episodes since there's some ongoing stuff happening there.
Yeah, maybe. Well, no. So see, the Innocence Project was after the first conviction. So I have no idea if anything is going to happen now after the second one. I mean, 2 juries did find him guilty after hearing the prosecution's case. So,
okay, well, stay tuned.
We'll continue in just a minute right after this quick break from today's sponsor. If you're a business owner, you don't need us to tell you that running a business is tough, but you might be making it harder on yourself than necessary. Don't let QuickBooks and spreadsheets slow you down anymore. It's time to upgrade to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the old software you've outgrown. Now's the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need all in one place instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite. Join the over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with the free product tour at netsuite.com/court. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/court. That's netsuite.com/court.
Well, speaking of case updates, you have a couple of updates for us, Jillian, on episodes that you have done in the past. So let's jump into those. The first one is the case of Jamarion Lawhorn. So really quick recap there. This was the 12-year-old that stabbed a 9-year-old boy to death on a playground. He called 911. He said that he did it and that he wanted the death penalty. Investigators found out that he had been abused himself as a child, and he was, ultimately convicted. So I think you have some updates for us on that.
I do. So I think I told you in the episode, actually, I know I did, that every 6 months, there's this hearing to discuss his progress. And those meetings or those hearings go until his 19th birthday, which happens to be coming up in a couple months here. And at these hearings, they discuss his progress. The judge asks questions. They may, loosen some of his restrictions and things of that nature. So once he gets to his 19th birthday, there will then be another hearing. And at that hearing, they decide, the judge will decide whether or not to keep him until he's 21. And then on his 21st birthday, they will then revisit everything. Or he can actually just be released. The judge can decide to release him on his 19th birthday. So the very last 6-month hearing was in December 2020. And Jamarion told the judge that he is ready to be released on his 19th birthday. He said, quote, "I just feel like I'm ready for something new." So Jamarion had been granted permission to spend the holidays with an advocate and her family, which he did. And that particular advocate has been attending his hearings, and she has offered up her home as a place for him to live when he gets out. And at that hearing in December, the judge asked if he would want to live there. And he said yes, that he loves this advocate. He feels comfortable there. And now the next step is that the next hearing is in March. And that is when he's going to be 19 years old. So that's a really big hearing coming up. So we will see what happens. Now, in my episode, when I spoke with the prosecutor, she did say that although she is on board with his rehabilitation and she thinks he's making a ton of progress and she's really happy with the track that he's on, she's planning on asking for him to still be held until he's 21. She just wants to make sure that as much, intensive rehabilitation that he can undergo, that he does. So, but ultimately it's up to the judge, and the judge's remarks at this last hearing in December were, quote, "I continue to be impressed and so pleased about how well you've done and are doing. Again, I thank you for your continued outstanding work here." So that'll be really interesting come March. And we'll obviously talk about this again when that happens. But I'm interested to see if he's going to get out on his 19th birthday or whether or not they will hold him until he's 21.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This case was so heartbreaking because, like a lot of cases, there's no winners here. It's amazing the progress that he has made, especially because of his past abuse. But at the same time, when you're looking at the family of the victim, no justice will ever be enough for them. So how would they feel having their child's killer released? I don't know, but it's just something where you are proud and happy for Jamarion that he's making this progress, but then also remembering that somebody lost their lives and there's, so many families and people that are in pain because of it. So it's just really, really tough. All right. Well, keep us up to date on that one.
Well.
All right. And also an update from An Unlikely Friendship, which was episode 119. So this was a case that was about two women who had allegedly tried to murder or did murder their husbands. So both women were convicted and became friends while we're in prison together. So what updates do you have on that?
So on December 31st, so just a few weeks ago, one of those women, Anita Smithey, who was convicted for murdering her husband, was granted a new trial. The 5th District Court of Appeals found that a trial court judge erred when he denied her a new trial after her former attorneys made a mistake, which I'll get into in a second, that allowed prosecutors to introduce evidence that was, what they say, devastating to her case. So at her trial, Anita Smithey said that she had only shot her husband after he had raped her. Now, during her interview with police, she at first invoked her right to remain silent, but the officers ignored that and continued questioning her. So then she told them that she had stabbed herself, because if you remember, she had stab wounds on her, because she feared that no one would believe that she had killed him in self-defense. Now, that statement was initially not allowed in at the trial, but her attorneys introduced the 911 call that she made where she says her husband had stabbed her. So because they had opened that door, then the prosecution was able to bring that evidence or that statement in. And prosecutors can either appeal this decision for getting a new trial, they can go ahead with a new trial, or they can drop the charges. So we will see what happens with that one. And thanks to one of my listeners for sending me the update on that one and giving me the heads up.
Awesome. And where will you post when you have updates on these? Do you post that on Instagram?
So I do. I post those on Instagram. I also, depending on, if there's actually a new trial, I would then follow the trial and then post it up on my Patreon. For the top tier, the judge tier, I post update episodes on there. And then, also in this little forum that we have going in these sidebar episodes, I'll also be picking a couple past episodes and giving updates on them. So you can either look at Instagram, join Patreon, or just listen here.
Awesome. Well, and speaking of Patreon, you had a bonus episode that you released this month. Do you want to tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, I did. So I basically, just to briefly, because I don't want to give away too much, but I covered 2 cases in one episode. And one was in 2008. There's a husband and wife who were found deceased in their home. The husband's death was ruled a suicide. The wife's death remains to this day a mystery. There were problems in their marriage. And the manner of her death is undetermined. So it's kind of a mysterious case. And then I covered a couple in Orange County who was accused of raping and drugging multiple women. But it's a very complex case. There's like a battle of district attorneys that led to the case being charged, then dropped, and it's now sort of in limbo. So the funny thing about this bonus episode is that typically, just with Court Junkie in general, I only cover cases that have either gone through the court system or are currently. And these two cases are kind of up in the air if they'll ever, see a courtroom. But I still thought that that my listeners would find them interesting. And so that's why I cover those. So those can be found on Patreon. If you go to courtjunkie.com/support, that'll take you to my Patreon page. And there's 2 tiers that have the bonus episodes, which you can see listed out there.
Okay, so speaking of cases, active cases, let's talk about some cases that we are following right now. And we'll continue to update you guys on each month. I think, Jillian, you have a couple that you want to talk about.
Yeah. So I thought that this would be a good segment to kind of add in here just so we can, bring other cases to the forefront of our, listeners' minds. This first one takes place in Bellevue, Washington, about 15 miles east of Seattle. So in July 2020, 48-year-old Baron Lee was walking from his apartment to his car when he heard what sounded like fireworks. When he turned around, he saw a teenage boy holding a gun. The boy shot him twice in the arm and leg. He fell to the ground. And then the boy continued shooting at him 7 more times. These shots hit his arm, legs, torso, and hip. He was laying in the fetal position and somehow managed to survive. But his ordeal was not even close to over then. In October, just 3 months later, prosecutors ended up charging his ex-wife, with whom he had been involved in a custody battle, with putting a hit out on him. Her name is Sharon Rose Kelly. And then police also arrested 2 17-year-olds and charged them with trying to kill him in exchange for $13,000. Now, prosecutors say that when Sharon learned that her ex-husband had survived, she met up with the teenagers again and started plotting with them to try again. In fact, one of the teens had sent her a text message and asked when they would be paid after, they had shot him and almost critically injured him. And she responded, quote, "Job unfinished, will need to complete unless it resolves on its own in the next month." She told him that her ex-husband had unfortunately survived, and the teen agreed to try again. But before they could continue with their next attempt, however, they were all arrested. One of the teenagers ended up talking to police and telling the police everything, but the other teenager, along with the ex-wife, just retained attorneys and have refused to talk. So that's going to be a pretty concrete case. There's phone records, emails. She had placed a GPS tracker on her ex-husband's car and then gave that information to one of the teens. They're all charged with attempted murder along with some other charges. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think it's going to resolve itself quickly. But, that poor husband, or ex-husband, I should say, having to live through that and then knowing that someone he undoubtedly once cared about and shares a child with would try to take his life not once, but multiple times.
It sounds like a concrete case, cut and dry, but I want to know what's going on in this lady's head. Like, this reminds me of the story that you did on 2020. She was, what was her name? It escapes me now.
Dacia Dippolito.
Right. How could that name escape me? She was just an interesting character and very quotable in some of the things that she said. So I will be interested to hear what happens with this, because there's something sinister going on in this lady's mind.
So another case that I'm following, on New Year's Day at a restaurant in Orlando, Florida, a waitress, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, so I'm sorry, but I think her name is Flavane Carvalho, noticed a couple who sat down with a young boy who was 11 years old. The couple ordered food for themselves, but she noticed that they did not order food for the boy. She also noticed that the boy had bruises on his face and arms, and so she was obviously understandably concerned. She ended up going to the back, writing a note that said, "Do you need help?" And then she stood behind the parents and held it up so that the boy could see it. At first, the boy shook his head no, but then he eventually nodded yes. So she went back and called the police. Now, the police came and discovered that the boy was being abused. Not only did he have bruises all over him, but the boy told police some horrific details about what his parents put him through at home. And I'm going to spare you the details. But in addition to being physically abused, the boy said he also wasn't allowed to eat on a regular basis as punishment. He was taken to the hospital where he was found to be at least 20 pounds underweight. His father was arrested on multiple counts of aggravated child abuse and child neglect. And his mother, who admitted to police that she knew about the abuse, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of child neglect. According to Channel 2 News, the restaurant owner said that the waitress, Flavane Carvalho, wasn't even scheduled to work that day, but she came in after another server called in sick. And the owner also said that the family just happened to be seated at the only table where it would have been possible for her to hold up that sign without the parents seeing it. The Orlando police chief said that had that waitress not called the police, that he believes it would have turned into a homicide investigation. He said that she saved this little boy's life. So when I saw this, I mean, as a mother, I just, what amazing instincts on that waitress to identify a situation and then actually take action on it, to actually call the police and to have that frame of mind and to risk herself. I mean, the parents could have turned around at any moment and seen her holding up this sign. She could have lost her job, maybe worse, who knows? So, they say it takes a village to raise a child. And it just kind of reminds me that we're all responsible for the children of the world, in a sense. If you see something like this, it's so imperative to speak up about it. And that woman is an absolute hero in my mind.
I definitely have chills listening to this story and just so thankful that she was there and all the stars aligned for her to be able to help that kid, because there are so many situations where there's not somebody to help. So I think that whatever happens with this case is a good reminder to anybody that's listening to just be on the lookout. I have 2 kids. I know I'm always focused on them, but if you can just check your surroundings and see what's happening around you, and if something, the saying, like, if you see something, say something, that is real and has saved lives in so many situations. So it sounds like so far this is a good ending for that kid, but follow along. Let us know what happens there.
Absolutely, I will.
Okay, so I'm following a case that I want to talk about really quickly. This is a case about Molly Tibbet. So it's close to home for me. I wouldn't say that there's anything particularly fascinating or salacious about this case, but it just is close to my heart. So the suspect in this trial, the case against him is very strong. I don't anticipate anything going awry here, but as I said, it's close to me. So Molly was a 20-year-old student at the University of Iowa. And at that time, my younger sisters were both students at the University of Iowa. I also went there. So the Hawkeye family is strong. If anything happens to our Hawkeye family, we all feel it. And so in 2018, Molly was in her hometown of Brooklyn, Iowa. She went out for a jog on a summer night and she was never seen again. And she was missing for a month. And during that month that she was missing, there was a Facebook group that was created for her, and thousands of people were sending their thoughts and their well wishes and just praying for a safe return for her. And at one point, it turned a little bit sinister. And there were trolls who were creating fake accounts and making really just very terrible comments, alluding to the fact that she was dead, that she would never see the light of day again. And it was just very unsettling. I remember I was on the Facebook group reading the comments that people were saying. And as I was reading, this comment popped up from this fake Facebook account saying you'll never find her. And it sent chills all through my whole body and made me feel so sick to my stomach. And I was thinking, oh my God, I hope that they delete this comment before her family sees. And it was just so gut-wrenching for a whole month before she was ultimately found. Unfortunately, she had been stabbed. And of course, it hit our hometown, our Hawkeye family so hard that this girl just went out for a run and never returned home. And so it was really tough. I followed it then. I'm following it now. They did arrest a suspect and he is on trial. The case is delayed because of COVID and this and that, but I'm following it very closely. I did see that the defense had requested her bank statements, and this was denied. It just got me thinking, what are they trying to do here? What could they possibly want with her bank statements? The evidence against him, like I said, is pretty solid. He was on camera following her as she was running through her hometown, just other forensic evidence that was found. So I don't know what they're trying to do there with getting her bank statement information, but ultimately that was denied. But I'll be interested to see where this goes and excited for this case to come to a close and the person who did this to be held accountable for their actions. So I will report on this as things happen there.
I remember hearing about it, but I admittedly don't know the details of the case. And that is not one that I'm following super closely. How awful that the family had to go through that. Their loved one is missing. And then to have people online trolling them and saying things like that. It's just horrible.
You wonder what's going through somebody's mind. I don't think that the suspect is the person who was doing this. I think it was just really somebody sick that wanted to get some notoriety in this Facebook group. But it was very disturbing and part of this case, which I don't know that they'll necessarily discuss in any sort of coverage here, but just because I followed it so closely and I saw it happening right away, it just does not sit well with me. And I think in addition to holding the suspect accountable or the murderer accountable, they need to find these trolls who just, thrive on people's pain. I think that at some point with social media and how much that plays into today's culture, there will be punishment for people who do things like this, because it is very harmful to the family and to just general public to make a mockery of somebody's pain. It was really, really hard. So those are the cases that we're covering now. I assure you that we will keep you up to date on those. Something else that we want to talk about is Phil Spector. So Phil Spector recently passed away in prison, and the media coverage over his death was, to put it lightly, disheartening. Mm-hmm. And I saw a couple of headlines that were appropriate. And then I saw many headlines that were not appropriate for this. So Jillian, walk us through what happened here.
So same as you, I saw a lot of headlines that were fine, but I saw some that made my blood boil, to be quite honest with you. So in 2009, Phil Spector was convicted of murdering 40-year-old Lana Clarkson. Lana was an actress and Phil was a music producer. They met at the House of Blues in Los Angeles one night, went back to Phil's house where he shot and killed her. He tried to claim that she had killed herself, but the jury didn't buy that, and nor did, honestly, most people. And he was convicted in 2009 and was serving a 19 years to life in prison sentence. And just a couple of weeks ago, like you said, he passed away while in jail. Some reports said that it was natural causes. Others say he contracted COVID-19. Whatever the case, a lot of the media coverage, and especially on Twitter, was less than desirable. And some examples, Rolling Stone tweeted, quote, Phil Spector, the famed wall of sound producer and architect of some of pop music's most enduring songs, whose legacy was marred by a murder conviction,
has died at the age of 80. So what is your take on, like, what do you think when you hear that?
Yeah, blood boil is a good way to put it. Just with the Molly Tibbetts case, I'm talking about the family and respect for the family. Where is the respect here for the victim?
Right.
None.
How are you marred by a murder conviction? It just trivializes it. And it's just like an aside that they put in there after they raved, calling him a famed producer, an architect of some of pop music's most enduring songs. While all of that might be true, you can't just throw in that his legacy was marred by a murder conviction. So BBC's tweets read, talented but flawed producer Phil Spector dies aged 81. So they didn't even mention the fact that he had killed anybody. They called him talented but flawed. I mean, that's not a flaw. Killing somebody is not a flaw. It was very bizarre. Now, they did later apologize because there was a lot of backlash for that headline, and they changed it to pop producer jailed for murder dies at 81, which is better. But, again, it was just like those two examples specifically. I saw that and was like, what? That is not okay.
It's bizarre for sure. Okay, so we have a couple listener questions for you if you're ready.
Let's do it.
Okay.
And again, before we do these sidebar episodes, we're going to record them at the end of every month, right? So if anybody ever has any questions that you want to ask of us or things you want us to talk about or feedback, certainly let us know. Go to Court Junkie's Instagram, or you can send an email to podcast@courtjunkie.com. You can tweet us at Court Junkie Pod. Just a myriad of ways to submit a listener question.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a couple good ones for you.
Okay,
so the
great.
first is, do you think you'll cover any Canadian court cases in the future?
Well, this is an excellent time to plug one of my favorite podcasts and podcasters, Canadian True Crime by Christy Lee. Christy is an Australian, actually, who moved to Canada years ago, and she covers the most fascinating trials and cases in Canada. So I just want to put that out there because honestly, I adore her so much. We have a very similar style. So I guess if you like Court Junkie and want to hear Canadian cases, it makes sense to definitely give her podcast a chance. As far as me, so that's Canadian True Crime. As far as me covering Canadian cases, I don't rule it out. And in fact, I would love to do some kind of collab with Christy. And I have done a few cases in the past. Just off the top of my head, Cody Lejebokoff, he was one of Canada's youngest serial killers. And J.R. Richardson, it was like, I think it was like in episode 6, was the 12-year-old who murdered her entire family. Horrifying case. That was also in Canada. So yes, I am interested in covering Canadian cases. It's not as familiar for me, to know where to get certain information and things like that and to follow the cases. I believe they're a little bit more guarded with their information. So, but I would actually love to do some kind of collaboration with Christy from Canadian True Crime. That would be my ideal.
All right, Christy. Your move.
All's in your court.
Okay, so I love this question. Is Court Junkie your primary job, or do you have a day job as well?
Well, my primary job is as a mom. No, I'm just kidding. It is my primary job. It didn't start out that way. I actually, and I think I've said this before in another episode or another interview, but I did end up leaving my day job to start this podcast, but I had freelance marketing work lined up for myself. So I was doing work for, I believe it was at least like 3 other companies at the time while I was working on Court Junkie. And I had to get really scrappy with it and approach some local, companies and ask if they would please advertise on my little podcast that I was starting. And with each contract that I was able to secure, it just like bought me more time before I would have to then go back out there and, get or start working in the workspace again. So it is my full-time job. Luckily, in April of 2017, I was able to
signed with an advertising company, and Court Junkie's just luckily grown since then. So yes, this is my full-time job, my baby, all of it.
Okay. So I alluded to this at the beginning, and I'm interested because I don't know this story. So, Jillian, you said that the other day you had an instance which reaffirmed that you are truly a court junkie. So I want to hear this story.
It's so funny. When I put this on our little agenda, I was like, okay, I'm just let me kind of ramble here. So this is something that I don't know. I'm just guessing that a lot of my listeners can relate to something like this. And I know certainly you can. Back, years and years ago, when you realized that you liked watching Discovery ID or Court TV, and you liked following these types of cases, and you liked watching true crime documentaries and things like that, it wasn't as mainstream. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it was more so like this little kind of club where you would talk to someone, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you like true crime too? So do I, like that kind of thing. And now it's definitely more mainstream. I think true crime is one of the most popular genres in podcasting, at least probably in documentaries too. But from time to time, I am just reminded of my little oddities that remind me that I'm a court junkie. So for example, this happened to me last week. My husband actually woke up before me, which is very rare. I'm always the first person awake in my household. I even, beat my 2-year-old daughter in waking up. I'm just constantly up. I like to get, a good cup of coffee going first. So my husband actually was awake before me. And he asked me when I woke up, he was like, what was Layla's, she's got this little riding motorcycle. He's like, why was Layla's motorcycle at the bottom of the stairs? That was really weird. And I was like, oh, I forgot to move it. But it's part of my ritual at nighttime. And it's so funny because I don't even think twice about this. I just do it. So I am just always terrified that someone's going to break in, most likely during, the middle of the night. So I will booby trap my house so that I make sure that, we can wake up if we hear somebody in the house. So, we do have an alarm, but it's more than that. You can't always trust alarms. They can,
What about Corky?
We do have a dog. I have a dog, but he's a small dog. Okay. My dog will.
Would he not go nuts?
With kisses. He will go nuts, but I just still like to booby trap the house. So, but usually I don't even think twice about it. I wake up in the morning and I'm the first one. So then I just move everything kind of back. So my husband has had no idea that I even do this, and there's other things that I'll do too, to kind of booby trap the house. But that was just one that I kind of got caught. And it just made me think of, when you remove yourself from the situation, what sort of things do you do? Because I'm sure I can't be the only one who does stuff like this.
I'm kind of laughing at you, but I'm also remembering that when my husband and I went on our honeymoon, we ended up staying, had an unplanned trip to a different island. And we ended up staying in a hotel where we didn't bring anything with us. We had taken a boat to this hotel, to this island, and stayed overnight without anything. It was unplanned. And we met a ton of people on the way there. And we were telling everybody, oh my God, this is totally random. We just came over here for the night. We're on our honeymoon, this and that. Ended up getting a hotel room to stay overnight. And as we got into the room, I was thinking, we are I don't even know where we are. I have no cell phone reception. We have told so many people that we are on our honeymoon, that we aren't familiar with where we're at or what we're doing. And I started to have some major anxiety. And so my husband passes out and I start to booby trap our hotel room, because it was kind of it was a hotel room, but it was also kind of a suite. And there were windows that you could just open up. And so I took a broom and put the broom, under the door handle. And then I put some silverware on top of the window over the sink. So yeah, I feel you. When you're telling that story, I was like, okay, Jillian, but I've definitely done that before. Not on a regular basis, because my dog will just absolutely go crazy. but I've done it before. So I feel you there.
Okay. So, and then not even booby trapping, but like there's other things as well. Like, so for example, you just mentioned going out of town on vacation. I can, anywhere we go, like, especially in the United States, I can easily think about a case that occurred there or, you know, a missing person maybe, or a trial or something like that. It's like this weird sort of talent that I have, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't want to like ever tell my husband because it's like, okay, like, I mean, I have before, but like, I don't think he knows that every time I can do it, but yeah, you know, so that's just another way.
Okay. So this is fun. So if you're listening to this, if you have an experience, a thing, a nuance that really proves that you are a court junkie, that it is in your blood, send it to Jillian at Court Junkie on Instagram, and then we'll share those next time because I think that will be really interesting to hear.
Totally. And actually, better yet, if you can create an Instagram story telling your story and just tag Court Junkie in it, we will repost that on Court Junkie's Instagram and we will talk about it on our next episode too.
I love it.
Yeah. So I would love to hear everybody's stories, to know that we are not alone.
Yes, absolutely. We're not alone. So I think that's all for us. We had a really awesome first episode of Sidebar. Covered a lot. Can't wait to continue to do this every month, as Jillian mentioned before. If you have any questions or any thoughts on any cases, send it to Jillian on Instagram or email, carrier pigeon, whatever your mode of communication is, and we'll talk about it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Brittnee. And thanks to all of you for listening/watching. These episodes we're going to be releasing every month on Court Junkie's main feed. And then we also will be posting a video version of this. So if you'd rather watch us talk about all of this stuff, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Court Junkie, and see us there. Right. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks.